Welcome to How to Yu-Gi-Oh!
Let's explain the real issue.
Chapter 1.
Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the real issue in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why I advocate for banning or removing Omni negates. Well, with that being said, let's get on with the rest of the video.
Chapter 2.
So, you ask me, my fellow students, about Handtrap Floodgates. Why is it that I've been advocating for us to get rid of Omni negates? Part of the reason for this is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has structural problems, and we've had Handtrap Floodgates for a while now. One of the justification for these Handtrap Floodgates to remain in the game is because we've had generic Omni negates. And we still do currently have generic Omni negates. But as long as the Omni negates are removed from the game, then Konami will have no choice but to get rid of just Handtrap Floodgates. And as we go to the next slide, these Handtrap Floodgates include Dimension Shifter, Artifact Lancia, and Droll Lockbird. First, let's talk about Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter, since its inclusion into the game, is one of those cards that has been absolutely a floodgate with its existence. Every time it is activated, it turn skips the opponent.
It's always my turn.
It is absolutely disgusting, absolutely vile. Its justification for existence is because it could be negated with the various generic Omni negates that we have in the game. But if we remove the generic Omni negates for the game, then the reason of the existence of Dimension Shifter in the game can no longer be viable.
I like it.
Another reason for its existence is it deals with combo decks which have a lot of generic Omni negation. Again, Floodgate's existence or rather Handtrap Floodgate's existence are all on the premise that generic Omni negates exist. However, if generic Omni negates do not exist, then their existence is rendered irrelevant and they are way too powerful to exist in the game. These are cards initially that are designed to deal with a lot of generic Omni negates that are in the game. That's hence why they are floodgate in nature. But their effects are extremely powerful and extremely broken. Hence why we can now target them and remove them from the game only when generic Omni negates are out and are banned, all of them in Yu-Gi-Oh! So that is part of the reason why Shifter needs to go. Shifter's, ever since its introduction into Yu-Gi-Oh!, has done nothing for the game. It has facilitated just FTKs on its own, right? The amount of games that we have been stolen from Shifter is absolutely insane. Alright, so let's leave it at that. We have Artifact Lancia. Sure, Artifact Lancia, with the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been going, is not really relevant. But as we're going to the future sets and more archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are relying on banishment as a common feature. And this is something that we need to really talk about. Lancia right now is starting to look like a floodgate as we move on and on into the future. Look at future archetypes, and a lot of archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now rely on banishment as a form of recovery now. And Lancia is looking to be way too powerful. For example, the archetype that has just recently come out, which is Malice. Malice is cannot operate at all if you activate Lancia under it. And I think we're going to get such cases in the future. Obviously now, the argument for Lancia staying in the game is a bit weak and is a bit justified, as not every archetype uses banishment to a certain degree, but That doesn't mean that the conversation around Lancia shouldn't be considered, as Lancia definitely is having some impact on decks, even with decks that you don't think need to banish are banishing. For example, we have what do we call it? Evenly matched. Some blowout cards that exist in the game cannot activate because of Lancia. So definitely Lancia needs to be put in the conversation when it comes to Handtrap Floodgates. And finally, Droll Lockbird. I think Droll Lockbird has become very similar to Dimension Shifter. It has become so powerful in its own right that whenever Droll is introduced into the format, usually competitive players know, generally, as players, we know that format is going to be a really bad format.
Facts.
Droll in the format usually means that the format is sort of bad and it's kind of disgusting. And just the fact that its inclusion and its existence means bad news and means you're going to have a bad time really goes to show the relevance and power that Droll Lockbird brings into the game. Whenever Droll Lockbird is in the competitive scene, loads of meta decks really can't compete. As a lot of modern decks, a lot of them do a lot of searching, do a lot of adding. Again, part of the inclusion and part of the reason why Droll Lockbird still exists and can still exist now is because generic Omni negates still exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, these three Handtrap Floodgates, all they have in common is that they can exist, they're extremely powerful, but their justification for existence is that generic Omnis are in the game. But if generic Omnis in TCG are all of them, when they are all banned, then the discussion about these generic Handtrap Floodgates really comes into question whether they deserve to exist. For example, Shifter right now is definitely looking to have a target on its back. As we know, in the next list or so, Malice isn't going to be hit. But the justification of hitting Shifter, 100%. May possibly no Shifter ban, but Shifter going to 1 would be huge and would ultimately kill Shifter and remove Shifter from the game. I think that would really be good. I think as an archetype, Malice isn't bad. I think Shifter is absolutely toxic, extremely just disgusting, and shouldn't exist in the game. There's nothing wrong with Malice. In fact, when we look at Malice as an archetype, players don't hate it. I don't think any player in the TCG or OCG hates Malice. What we players hate is Shifter that accompanies Malice. That's what players hate. That card is a complete turn skip, and when usually it is activated, no archetype in the game can deal with it. Which is there are only like 4 archetypes in the game that can deal with Shifter. One is Flunderies, second is Kashtira, third is Malice itself, and fourth is Metaphys. So these 4 archetypes are the only ones that are in the game that can deal with Shifter. When it comes to Lancia again, Lancia looks to be a future Floodgate that we will have in Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously now, the justification for it being in the game is very justified, as banishing hasn't become a core mechanic of archetypes just yet. But that's not to say that it won't become a core archetype in the future, as we are beginning to see banishing being more relevant in more and more archetypes as a form of recovery, as a form of way of protecting your cards, especially introduced in the Link era. Loads of spells or traps in the Link era with a lot of archetypes have this effect of if a monster is to be destroyed, banish this spell or trap instead. If a linked monster is to be destroyed by battle, banish this instead. A lot of hidden protection from effects, especially, was introduced in the Link era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And definitely banishing is a disguised form of protection for a lot of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! So watch this space, as Lancia definitely is looking to be a card that we will definitely see to be a problem in the future, and I think should be addressed. Droll Lockbird, I think enough needs to be said. Droll Lockbird is an extremely powerful card, and when it is usually a turn skip. Very few archetypes can play around Droll Lockbird. Unless you have a Omni negate, then usually if a Droll Lockbird is set onto archetype, it's usually dead. In fact, it even counters Malcharmy. So there is an argument that Droll Lockbird can stay because it counters Malcharmy. I don't know. It's a bit difficult. So all I've got to say is that definitely Dimension Shifter looks to be a card that I think sometime this year could see a hit. Not a ban, but maybe a limit to 1 or a semi-limit to 2 or something like that. Hopefully. Speculation anyway. Let's move on.
Chapter 3.
And here we have this slide, Monster Floodgates. So let's talk about the Monster Floodgates we have. And I think there's only one Monster Floodgate in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the moment. The rest have been banned. I mean, technically we do have Protos, but Protos, again, is a Floodgate that can be, as they say, negated. We do also have, the Colossus, Thunder Dragon Colossus. But again, Thunder Dragon Colossus is not that bad. While it is droll, while it's on the field, it can be negated. There are ways to stop it, as we have Dark Ruler no more, as their quick effects. The issue is, with Abyss Dweller, as you can see on this slide, there is no such instance. Abyss Dweller, as you can see from its effect, negates the graveyard, and so graveyard effects can't activate.
That's too strong.
The graveyard in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become the secondary deck. It's become such a useful part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. Essentially, closing the graveyard is equivalent to closing like a half of every deck in the game.
I can't deny that. It's just the truth at this point.
So many decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now use the graveyard as a resource. In fact, every single modern deck, I think, uses the graveyard as a resource, with very few exceptions. And this is why the justification of Abyss Dweller existing can be really said to be, it definitely deserves a ban. I definitely think, if maybe in the next ban list or in a future ban list. Abyss Dweller is looking to be a monster floodgate that can't really be argued to be healthy to exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is not just because of Ryziel, but again, Abyss Dweller has always been this card in all of our players' minds, that this is a card that is extremely powerful and has always, whenever it's been appeared, has always had this reputation of just being a little bit too powerful. It has been in the discussion for a long time whether this card should even exist, and now that it's coming up again, definitely looking to be a card that can see a ban, right? Definitely, for sure.
The truth you need to know.
So this is a card we can definitely think about in the future. We can see getting a ban, and if this gets a ban, then hopefully, fingers crossed, because in the OCG it has been banned. We'll see, maybe in the TCG it'll be banned in the upcoming ban list. Who knows? But all excited for this. So let's go to the next point.
Chapter 4.
Here we are, and on this slide we'll talk about generic Omni negates. And as we go to the next slide, the generic Omni negates, as you can see in front of you, include Azamina, Ilia Sylvia, and Fiendsmith Desiree. Now, you may look at it and you may ask my fellow students, these don't look like generic Omni negates, but I believe they are. Now, Desiree, again, is used in the Fiendsmith package, and the Fiendsmith package is extremely linear and is a package that we have today, and is just basically placed everything and is in most modern decks, and a lot of archetypes have just used the Fiendsmith package as a good thing and just boosted their power level to a whole new level. Now, me personally, I don't have an issue with the Fiendsmith package. Because one of the reasons why I don't mind the Fiendsmith package, but I hate generic Omni negates, is because the Fiendsmith package, there's a lot of things you need to do to play the Fiendsmith package. Your extra deck, for one thing, the amount of space it takes, the amount of knowledge you need to do. It's not the same as putting in a Baron, for example. But even I can see that this engine, even though I agree with its existence, that doesn't mean necessarily I still think it should exist. I still think Desiree is a bit busted and a bit unfair, considering everything that the engine brings.
Restriction is stronger than prevention.
Because the engine allows you to go into wave high king Caesar, which is a summon negate. You then have an Omni negate with Desiree, and you also have IP Masquerena, which goes into an SP Little Knight. So there's a lot of things that this engine gives you, and I personally think Desiree is a bit too much.
That's a bit much, don't you think?
You already have the disruption, which is IP into SP, and you have a summon negate. Why, out of all things, do you need an Omni negate on top of that? That is way too much. And for that reason, I definitely think Fiendsmith Desiree should be banned in the future. The engine does way too much, and you have way too much resources. Sure, like the argument can be said, and the argument I've said before, that the engine is super tight and you don't have a lot of wiggle space in your extra deck, and there's a lot of price to be paid. But that doesn't mean I don't realize or justify that this engine should still exist. On the other hand, while I do like the engine, I think the Omni should go. In my personal opinion, I believe engines are fine. I don't believe an engine, however, should really provide you with all solutions. Having a solution for everything, being contained and being able to eat your cake and do all manners of silly things just because you have an engine, I think isn't fair. I think you are just eating your cake and having it too is a bit too much. And so definitely, in my eyes, Omni negations are not fine. This is why I am okay with Wave King High Caesar, but I am not okay with Desiree. Because Wave King High Caesar, you can play around it. There is counterplay, I might add. However, with Desiree, with Omni negates, there's never any counterplay. This is why I prefer type negation and like Wave King High Caesar, as it only has negation of a certain type and doesn't negate everything. Whereas Desiree, there's no counterplay. As whenever an Omni negation is put together with disruption and type negation, the board becomes completely impossible to break. So bear this in mind. I'll also talk about Azamina Ilia Sylvia. Now, Azamina Ilia Sylvia is a card I don't see getting hit in our next list. In fact, maybe even Fiendsmith Desiree or Fiendsmith Ilia Sylvia won't be hit in the next list at all, and they might hit other things in the list. But I still think they should still get hit. Now, Azamina hasn't been doing much in the TCG ever since the end of last year, and we had that ban list hitting OSS, I believe. Original OSS, which stands for Original Sinful Spoils, right? Ever since that's been hit, Azamina in TCG has completely fallen off the face of the earth. But that doesn't mean I do not, just because I do not agree with Azamina Sylvia. Now, Azamina Ilia Sylvia is quite interesting, and I think it doesn't deserve to be hit. While I would say like it should get banned, I'll say like the engine is really big enough, and the engine locks you quite a bit, that it goes to the point where like when you do play Azamina, Sylvia, the engine is so big that in the end you end up just playing an Azamina deck, and you don't really play that deck that you were wanting to play. Sif, I think some exceptions do apply. I've definitely seen Azamina with put in together with, say, Cristrons. So I'm definitely seeing some potential nonsense there. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for me, and I'm not really too sure. But make no mistake, I still do feel Omni negates in general should still be banned, and I think disruption is much better in the long term for Yu-Gi-Oh! Than negation, than Omni negation. I have no issue with type negation, however. I do have issue with Omni negation. And Omni negation, I feel, is the worst kind of negation for Yu-Gi-Oh! As Omnis means they can just negate everything and there is no counterplay. Whereas with type negation, they only negate a certain type. Like Wave King High Caesar negates summons. Evil Sword Dolka only negates monster effects. etc. Where you have these sorts of extra deck monsters that only negate one thing, one type. They don't negate everything. They don't do everything. Those are the sort of negations that are healthy in my eyes, and those are the sort of negations that I like. Type negation, not omni negation. Bear that in mind.
Chapter 5.
Healthy cards. So in this part of the video, I'm going to be talking about healthy cards. And as we go to the next slide, the healthy cards include SP Little Knight, IP Masquerena, Silhouette Rabbit, and DDD Wave High King Caesar. Now, you look at this, and a lot of you will say that SP Little Knight isn't healthy at all. But I want to say something that is very important. SP Little Knight can be played by every deck, absolutely. But here's the thing. SP Little Knight does not stop your plays. You can play around it, and it does promote healthy gameplay. IP into SP, again, is not disgusting. It is not broken. What made IP into SP Little Knight broken during 2024 was because there was an Omnigate on top of disruption. Disruption on its own in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not unhealthy. What is unhealthy is when negation is together with disruption. That's what's unhealthy. Especially if the negation is an omni negation. And so we have Silhouette Rabbit. Silhouette Rabbit, again, is a fantastic way of negation. One, you need to run a brick. Okay, you need to run the trap. So there is a chance that you will draw the trap and the negation isn't live, or the effect of Silhouette Rabbit won't activate. Whatever it is. But there's just so much to love about Silhouette Rabbit that I think it is perfectly healthy. And then we come to Wave High King Caesar. I love this card. I love everything about it. First of all, this card isn't generic, as it needs 2 level 6 Fiend monsters. Yes, I know that Fiendsmith obviously spam out this card left and right, but realize this is not a card that every deck can make it. Again, it is not generic. And also, its effect is only negates summons. It doesn't negate monster effects. I want to hammer home this point. It is not a omni negation. It is only a summon negation, right? Extremely important here. So it means it doesn't stop cards such as Ash Blossom, Drolling Lockbird, or any of the sort. It will stop Nibiru because Nibiru summons itself. That's about it. A very clear distinction.
That, my friends, makes all the difference.
This is why I like these 4 healthy cards. One of the reasons why I like these 4 healthy cards that you can see in front of you is that there is a lot of counterplay. There's a lot of ways to play around them once you know their effects. With SP Little Knight, for example, since you know when a card or effect is activated, right? You can target 2 face-up monsters. So all you've got to do is just bait out its effect, and or use a card like Creature Swap, for example, and so it'll have to the opposing player has to hop off the field with it. Fantastic card, great card in my opinion, and that's what it's all about. With IP Masquerena, sure, you can't really play around it as it's accelerated link, but with, cards such as Infinite Impermanence, Forbidden Droplet, Ultimate Slayer, and many more cards, Metal Tronus, many more cards that negate monster effects in a really quick way, there are loads of ways to counter IP Masquerena. Silhouette Rabbit, there is the potential that you draw the trap, so it's not useful, but it is what it is. Now you have DDD Wave Hiking Caesar, again, very great card, but if it's the only thing on the field, again, without a generic Omni negation to back it up, Wave Hiking Caesar can't really do anything, as it only negates summons. Again, it's very easy to play around this card. It's not that difficult. Sure, it can negate 2 summons, but in the big scheme of things, that's not a lot, especially with how modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks are constructed now. Summoning a lot of times is the default. In fact, special summon is something that we do so often in Yu-Gi-Oh now that really being able to just negate 2 summons is peanuts. It doesn't mean anything. And so with the person using Wave Hiking Caesar, the summons that you negate have to matter and have to have weight and impact, as you can only negate 2 summons. And that's about it. That to me is why I consider these 4 cards healthy.
Final chapter.
And here we are with the overall conclusion. So what I want to say is that when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! And the real issue to me comes with these Handtrap Floodgates, right? This is the real issue I believe Yu-Gi-Oh! Has. And these Handtrap Floodgates cannot be solved unless we get rid of the generic Omni negates we have in the TCG at the moment. So we are that step closer to going to a perfect game in Yu-Gi-Oh!
There's no way that I'd ever believe you!
The process of healing is long, and the time frame for us to be a perfect card game is fast approaching in my eyes.
You need to calm down with that.
Step number 1 is for us to ban all generic Omni negates. Step number 2 is also to ban all the monster floodgates. With the inclusion of Abyss Dweller left, and the moment Abyss Dweller is banned this year, because I'm doubly sure it's not going to survive the year. We are definitely getting rid of Abyss Dweller, in a ban list. If not this upcoming ban list, the next ban list.
You expect me to believe that?
There is no way that card can exist. And with Abyss Dweller gone, a lot of Handtrap Floodgates are really now going to be put on the chopping block, as their reason for existence really doesn't hold much weight anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because with the banning of Abyss Dweller, that will be all the monster floodgates that you can summon from the extra deck. At that point, they will all be banned, and the only floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh! That will be left are the Handtrap Floodgates. As Trap Floodgates, as of 2024, we have banned all of them, the ones that are important anyway. And the ones that you could spam out a lot are all at 1. So really, it's come to the point where, as we look into the future, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is automatically, by the end of 2025, looking to be much, much healthier. And when we go into 2026, well, since Konami is not printing any more generic Omni negates, as we can see from the future, and since they are printing. Their style has always been, for the most part, to print generic disruption, which is perfectly healthy. The game will automatically be in a good place. So yeah, I believe we still have not a long way to go, a short way to go, but we're nearly at the finish line, guys. We're nearly there, my fellow students, and don't worry, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be in a better place very soon. So the next ban list that we get in the TCG is going to be extremely important. No matter how hard or how soft they go, whatever happens, as I said, we're going to be winners in this. Well, that's all I've got to say in this video. Tune in next time as I'll talk about more things on my channel. Hope to see you soon.
We come to the end of this video. So, as I like to say, you are one step closer to becoming a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master. My fate, right, is in your hands.